On the AEW side this week, on Collision last Saturday, we had Hangman Adam Page defeating Christopher Daniels in a Texas death match. This was a bloody affair that included all the violence you could actually think of, including barbed wire tables and just barbed wire in general. After leaving Daniels in the ring, a complete bloody mess, Adam Page also kneeled down over his body for the entire 10 count as the match ended. But Adam Page then returned to the ring after the match was over to add insult to injury by using Christopher Daniels' own finisher, the Angel's Wing, on him as well. A move that Adam Page also used on Dynamite this week. Many are saying this is probably Christopher Daniels' retirement match. Even Daniels said so on Dynamite that this was going to be his last match due to doctors telling him that it's probably not good for him to continue to wrestle. So if that is the case, thoughts on the career of Christopher Daniels, the king of the indies, who's been all over the place. Basically every company known to man at some point or another. So, thoughts on him?
Yeah, I used to watch when I first started watching TNA. He was a huge focal point of TNA. Him and what's that guy's name? Skip. Skipper. They were a tag team, and they were dope to watch. But him and AJ Styles had some
that's what I remember.
Crazy cool matches there. Hell, him and Kazarian had some crazy matches. Sanjay Dutt,
Samoa
Joe. His heel run with the beard was weird because he looked really weird with just a bald head because his head's small, and like his beard was. But even him as Curry. You ever see the character Curry Man?
I don't think so. No,
it was him when they were doing that whole Suicide run and Manic. Well, Suicide turned to Manic because they had to change his name. At one point, there was a version of Suicide, and you could clearly tell it was Christopher Daniels because the way he moved, the way he's built, there's nobody built like him.
Oh,
yeah, he was a workhorse.
Well, Mike mentioned the Elix Skipper cage. Yeah, I've seen the cage walk. Everybody's seen the cage walk.
Elix Skipper was crazy good too.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, he walked that all the way across that one side, and the fact that he was able to maintain. And I mean, obviously, he leaned into it when he did the Hurricane Rana, but at the same time, the fact that he was able to go that distance with it is still outstanding in my opinion. So, TNA has. Especially during its prime earlier on, like with the Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles days, the X Division, it was some of the best pro wrestling out there. It was kind of like, it reminds me of like AEW when they first started, like they were kind of like this, different alternative to WWE, and they had these great matches. Sometimes maybe the storylines weren't the greatest, but I feel like lately AEW's kind of lost a little bit of that. But at the same time, I mean, the matches are usually still good. It's their storytelling that kind of has a hard time. But yeah, TNA was doing a great job with that, and they're doing a lot better nowadays too. So that's great to see. Also on Collision this week, we finally got the breakup of the Acclaimed. It felt a bit anticlimactic to me. I mean, we all knew it was coming with Max Caster's ego becoming too big and not backing it up in matches he's gotten destroyed in. But Anthony Bowens finally had enough, and surprisingly, despite some harsh words back and forth, they didn't have any physicality between the two. Billy Gunn was also there to give one final scissor with Bowens as Caster left the building, packed bag in tow. Not sure how I feel about both these guys going on their own just yet, but I guess time will tell to see how their solo careers go. But it was interesting how the best wrestler alive is what Max Caster has called himself, and because Anthony Bowens is gay, apparently he has now copyrighted the moniker of the Pride of Pro Wrestling, so that's what he's going to be calling himself now, from the sounds of things. So we'll see how that goes, and these two guys as they go their separate ways. So this week on Dynamite, though, it started off with which I thought was the best segment of the week for AEW. Will Ospreay called out Kenny Omega to ask for his help against the Don Callis family, but Omega wasn't having any of it initially. But once Don Callis came out to interrupt Kenny Omega again this week, Kenny tried to attack Don when Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher came out to attack Kenny. After a moment of hesitation, Will Ospreay decided to help Omega, and the fight was on for the next 15 minutes. They brawled all over the arena. Eventually, Lance Archer and Brian Cage, also of the Don Callis family, got involved, making it a 4-on-2 situation. The segment ended with Ospreay and Omega performing giant moonsaults off the balcony and a lighting truss onto the Callis family. And then Omega and Ospreay climbed the lighting truss and then proceeded to challenge Takeshita and Fletcher to a tag match at AEW Grand Slam in Australia. So While I don't see Ospreay and Omega staying infused with the Don Callis family forever, I think given the story of these two men both being members of Callis' family in the past and trying to push the young talent of Takeshita and Fletcher, this match could be god tier, and it's going to be a banger for sure. It's going to be one of those outstanding AEW matches we've all come to love at a pay-per-view level show. Thoughts on them teaming up? These two, more like the what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Ospreay and Omega?
Yeah. I just want this whole thing with the Don Callis family, it hasn't worked out with a lot of the guys. Don't get me wrong, Takeshita is great. If you were just paired off Takeshita and because nobody knows what to do with the Murder Hawk. I don't know why he left with.
Yeah, I don't know. But I do like the fact that he's teamed with Brian Cage now.
Yeah.
Right now they're just kind of squashing folks, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's like Takeshita would be good on his own. More people want to see Will Ospreay versus Omega, which you'll get at some point.
Oh yeah, that's happening again at some point. Yeah,
I would love to see Omega and Takeshita
which they did do, and Takeshita beat Omega. I want to say might have even beat him twice, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember, but that was unselfish of Omega to do that for him too.
Yeah,
so,
but this match will be good.
Oh yeah, this will be great. All four of these guys are outstanding, and all four can go. So, this could definitely main event that show for sure. I don't know if that will be the actual main event, but yeah, it could definitely do that for certain. Also on AEW, we got new AEW World Tag Team Champions as the Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin defeated Private Party to win the titles. The Hurt Syndicate have been pushed to the moon since coming to AEW, and while I feel bad for Private Party that it hasn't worked out too well with the tag team titles, I do wish them better days ahead, but this just makes too much sense to me not to put the belts on the Hurt Syndicate right now. I just don't see why you wouldn't, especially with the Private Party thing not going maybe as great as it possibly could. I think this was the right decision for the long haul. So
yeah, I do agree, but you could have done it a different way, where it wasn't just a squash match. Essentially,
it didn't last too long. I didn't feel like. Yeah,
but there was a way that you could have accomplished this same goal, but also made Private Party bigger faces coming out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, it is what it is. But Shelton Benjamin is I don't know why you wouldn't want him on your TV screen and as a champion. Same with Bobby Lashley. So
Well, even MVP got in the ring about a week or so ago, which was really good to see as well in a 6-man. So this is kind of where the show took a bit of a downhill turn for me. Jeff Jarrett cut a promo where he said on one day, him and MJF are going to meet up after last week's altercation, but Jarrett is focused on one last ride at the age of 57 years old and winning the AEW World Championship. So he called out Jon Moxley, but he got fellow Death Rider Claudio Castagnoli instead, as Claudio attacked him from behind when Claudio also warned him to give up going after Mox. But Jarrett he challenged Claudio to a match next week. If Jeff Jarrett wins, he gets a title match with Jon Moxley. Now, obviously, I don't believe they will be putting the AEW World title on Jeff Jarrett at any stage here.
Fucking better hope not.
Well, there's been reports going around to state just as much, so I don't think it's going to happen. But if that's not going to be what they do, then what's the goal here? MJF going to cost Jarrett his dream match next week against Claudio to set up MJF versus Jarrett? I mean, I know MJF's been talking about getting his title back as well, but it's like, I just don't. I get you're trying to do this like one last ride thing, kind of like you did with like Bryan Danielson. Mm-hmm. But if Jarrett's not going to win the title, I don't understand exactly why we're doing this. Any thoughts? I mean, I don't know. I can't think of one.
I don't know what the end goal is either, so I don't know.
I guess we'll have to tune in, wait and see. But yeah, I would think Claudio maybe just beats him right here, and that's the end of that. So I don't know. I just don't think it's working. I really don't. I mean, nothing against Jeff Jarrett; he's a legend, but I just don't think anybody wants to see that right now. The main event was Cope versus Pac, which on paper I kind of like. Yeah, I know it's Edge for crying out loud to us fans. But Cope defeated Pac in the main event of Dynamite in a pretty solid match for a guy, especially with one of these two is actually 51 years old. So I thought it was pretty solid in that regard. But Afterwards, Moxley and the Death Riders had FTR bound and gagged backstage, watching on as they destroyed the legendary Rock and Roll Express with a concerto. And seemingly without any help left, the Death Riders jumped Adam Copeland in the ring until Jay White came out to make the save. But the numbers game was just too much again, and the Death Riders leave Cope and Jay White laying in the ring as Dynamite goes off the air. So, in my opinion, this storyline needs to end fast. It's just not furthering anything, and it's becoming boring at this point. I hate to say it. It's becoming a bit like how Mike just mentioned, how the NWO just beat up people every week, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. There's some great talent involved, but I'm having a very hard time investing in the end goal here. Unless it's Copeland taking the title off of Mox, and like we just pointed out, Cope is 51 years old. Now, maybe Cope wins the title, and then Christian Cage cashes in his contract, but even then, again, Christian is getting up there in age. So, and I'm an AEW fan. I love AEW, but I'm having a hard time now. It's starting to get to me. Like every week, it's either maybe occasionally it's like when the NWO would occasionally get their comeuppance, but then the next week they would just destroy everybody again. I think initially when this whole idea came up, the Death Riders, like a lot of fans speculated Shane McMahon was going to come in and kind of be the one to be the leader of the group. But if that's not going to happen, it's not really got nowhere to go. Now, granted, that's partially on the fans for setting expectations too high. So that's not AEW's fault. But where it is AEW's fault is if you have no end game for this and you're just kind of going a week in, week out and just beating people up. What are your thoughts on this, Brandon? You said you had some thoughts on it.
So this makes no sense, like the way this is supposed to work, because it all hinged initially on Darby Allin being there, because Darby was supposed to be the one top of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Darby is not there because Darby
climbing Mount Everest. Yeah.
Like getting hit by a bus wasn't enough.
Yeah, I know, right?
Whatever. Their mission statement still makes no sense because they haven't done anything to warrant their mission statement being what it is. Like nobody fears them like they should. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's okay. I'll give you an example. When we did the Carnage Crew thing and how it started and how it started rolling and me being added to the group later by turning on my tag partner or whatever the case may be, we built up to that whole thing, right? And then we started targeting every big face in the company to where we would just run through them, destroy them, put them out, take, you know what I mean? Did whatever. We ran roughshod. Like, so when we would come out, naturally people fucking hated us.
Yeah.
As they were supposed to. So when we finally did get beat up and lose the titles and stuff like that, everybody was happy. There was cheers. You know, like there's none of that here. Yeah. This just looks like a couple disgruntled employees, and then nobody gives a shit.
Yeah. Like Mike pointed out too in the chat, he said there seriously was no other baby faces in the building to come out and help these guys. I mean, so if it's going to be like, faction warfare where we're going to take over and run AEW, that's what Moxley's Death Riders. Where's the rest of the locker room then?
Yeah.
Where's like when this whole thing started, you had, like you said, Darby, you had Daniel Garcia, you had Orange Cassidy. Where were they on this show to come out and back up Cope and Jay White? Nowhere to be found. So yeah. Mike also said the problem I had with the NWO beatdowns was where was the WCW locker room? It was supposed to be NWO versus WCW, but nobody had each other's backs at WCW. Yeah, so there's no united front, which I guess you could maybe build to the united front one day. But
that should have been something that's already established at this point.
Yeah,
we're too far in.
It's been since December or early? Yeah, I think December.
The moment Kenny Omega came back, Moxley should have been on his ass. The whole Death Rider. You get what I'm saying? Because he's one of those. He's the face of AEW. The moment he showed up, he should have got destroyed.
Yeah.
Because other than that, these are just a bunch of disgruntled employees, and the boss doesn't give a shit. Like Tony should have. You want to put some weight behind all of these threats and this, that, and the third. Have Tony have an interaction with it.
Yeah.
Because now it seems like it's the Death Riders versus AEW.
Yeah, it's like when the Young Bucks. it's like when the Young Bucks took out Tony Khan on that one episode. They gave him the Meltzer driver or whatever. Why isn't Moxley doing that to Tony Khan and then running the show?
Yes.
You know, something like that. After watching this angle, and as frustrated as I'm getting with it as an AEW fan, I have a hard time wondering how many fans sat through the NWO for how many years did they do that angle?
Fucking Christ.
Week in and week out, where, I mean, occasionally you'd have them drop the belt or whatever, or do that. But for the most part, it was just the NWO beating up guys. We couldn't handle that today.
No.
And I'm glad I watched WWE at the time. That's probably why WCW went out of business. Because again, they didn't evolve.
But even with WWE at the time, and like DX being DX, like they would always get to the line, but wouldn't pass it as far as antics and shit like that went, to where it was entertaining enough, but it wasn't overdone.
Yeah.
With the NWO shit, what happened was, if you couldn't beat them, join them. So then it was like the majority of the roster was NWO, and then it got worse after the split when it was NWO Wolfpack versus NWO Black and White, and it was like, all right, this is just. And then they started adding in celebrities and all this other shit, and then it just got to the point where it was too much, and you just quit caring because it didn't matter.
At least if they were to like occasionally add a new member to the group or something in the Death Riders, at least that would be something new. It'd be kind of shocking at first, but like you said, eventually that could become a problem. Yeah. So I don't know.
Just make this whole thing have some weight behind it, some gravity, some real like, oh shit, you know, this is but
maybe again, it will by like All In or something. But right now it's struggling.
You got all this time to build this whole thing up, man. Like to make by the time that happens, that pay-per-view happens. If you want to kick it up a notch, you have somebody defect to the Death Riders then.
Yeah.
You know, do that there. It's just there's no weight behind it. Again, no one has drawn that line in the sand. And if Darby was supposed to do that,
Coach's trying to, but I just don't know.
Nobody else is buying into it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
This has to be you have to make it feel like it's really AEW versus the Death Riders. And right now, it does not seem like that. And they've been at this story for a while.
Yeah, it feels like a lot longer than probably it actually is, too. Mike said, I think eventually Mox and Omega will go at it, and Omega gets beat down, and when things look bleak, the Bucks will return to make the save. Possibly, but again...
By the time you get to that, nobody's going to care.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody will care about it. We've seen Omega and Mox before, like the first year. So I don't know. I mean, they definitely need to work on something. I can't quite put my finger on what it is either. But like I said, I like the Ospreay, Omega segment early on, and the tag titles changing hands. But also, so I guess next week they did announce Will Ospreay versus Brian Cage, and in a couple weeks, or next week, and also Jeff Jarrett and Claudio. In a couple weeks, they got Swerve Strickland versus Ricochet, so that'll be coming up before too long too. So we got some stuff to look forward to. But yeah, they got to work on that main event angle. I'm not going to lie to you, they really, really do before it really starts to become more stale than it already is. So hopefully they'll get that sorted out. Thank you for checking out this clip of the Dragon's Den podcast. If you like what you saw here, please consider checking out our live podcast almost every single Friday night here on the channel at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And until our next video, guys, take care and God bless.